Have you ever made a decision and immediately started asking everybody else what they think? You know what you want to do. You have probably known for a while. You've thought about it, you've made the pros and cons list, and you've mentally rehearsed every possible outcome, and then probably made the contingency plans for those outcomes. You may have even conducted what can only be described as an unauthorized internal congressional hearing. And somehow, we are still polling the group chat. What would you do? Do you think this is reasonable? Am I overreacting? Would you be mad if someone did this? Does this make sense? And if enough people agree with you, there is this moment of relief. Okay. Good. I'm allowed. Except that is not always advice seeking. Sometimes you are not asking someone else to help you think. You are asking them to make your answer feel permissible. And those are two very different things. So today, I want to talk about why you can know what you want and still struggle to trust your own answer, why external validation can feel so necessary, and how to start building self-trust without pretending the good decisions never include other people's perspectives. Because other people can absolutely be useful. They just cannot be the voting committee for your entire life. So by the end of this, I want you to practice one very simple thing. Before you seek someone else's opinion and ask someone else what you should do, write down what you think first. Not the answer you think will sound reasonable, not the answer that you have to defend. Your answer. Then we can talk. So let's take a look at what this actually feels like. Maybe you already know you want to decline the invitation, but instead of declining it, you text 3 people. Would it be rude if I didn't go? Maybe you know the job is not working for you. But before you let yourself say that, you need someone to confirm that your reasons are sufficiently legitimate. Maybe someone said something that hurts you. And before you even ask yourself how you feel about what happened, you ask, am I being too sensitive? Maybe you want to change your mind, or leave something, or start something, or stop participating, spend money, not spend money, rest. Ask for something, say no, say yes. And your own preference somehow does not feel like enough information. You need the corroborating evidence, preferably from a jury of your peers. And this can get sneaky before it looks responsible. Doubtful even. I'm just getting another perspective. I don't want to make an impulsive decision. I'm trying to be fair. Those can all be true. Seeking input is not the problem. The question is, what job are you asking the input to do? Are you looking for information you genuinely do not have? Or are you trying to quiet the discomfort of making a decision somebody else may not agree with? Because those are not the same thing. So a lot of self-trust advice sounds like, just trust your gut, which is fucking lovely. Very concise. Looks fantastic on a mug. But here's the problem. What if you spent years learning not to? What if your instincts were always questioned? And what if you were told that you were dramatic, too sensitive, overthinking, difficult? What if you learned that other people's interpretation of your experience carried more weight than your own? What if you were rewarded for being easy, reasonable, flexible, agreeable? You know, the mediator. And what if being liked depended, at least sometimes, on being able to read the room and adjust yourself accordingly? Then trust yourself is not a switch you forgot to turn on. You may have spent years practicing the opposite skill. You got very good at noticing, what does everyone else need? What does everyone else expect? What response will create the least conflict? And what choice will make the most sense to other people? What explanation will make the decision acceptable? And somewhere in that process, your own internal yes and no can get very quiet. Not necessarily absent. Quiet. Sometimes you still know exactly what you want. You just don't trust that wanting is sufficient. And I think that distinction also matters. Because if you think the problem is, I don't know what I want, you will keep gathering more opinions. But if the real problem is, I know what I want and I'm afraid to make the choice without external permission, more opinions may actually make it harder. So now you have your answer, plus 5 other people's perceptions. Excellent. So clarifying. External validation, though, can provide a temporary sense of clarity. Somebody agrees with you and suddenly a decision feels safer. You feel less exposed, less selfish, less irrational, less likely to be wrong. And sometimes that is genuinely comforting. There is nothing inherently wrong with wanting reassurance. We are, after all, social creatures. We affect each other. Community matters, support matters, perspective matters. But reassurance can become a substitute for judgment. So you stop asking, what do I think? And start asking, who agrees with me? And those are two very different questions. Agreement tells you something about the other person's perspective. It does not automatically tell you what is right for you. And this becomes especially messy when you ask people who are personally invested in your decision. So if your choice changes something for them, their opinion is not neutral. That does not make them manipulative per se, but it does make them involved. So if you're thinking about leaving a job, your coworker may have feelings about losing you. If you're setting a boundary, the person affected by the boundary may prefer that you don't. If you're changing a family pattern, people who benefited from the old pattern may sincerely think the new version of you is unreasonable. That is information, but it's not the final verdict. This is also where the overexplaining comes in. Because when you do not fully trust your decision, you may feel like you need to build a case for it. You don't just say, I'm not coming. You say, I'm so sorry. It's just that this week has been really overwhelming and I already have this own thing and I haven't been sleeping well. And I know I said maybe before and I hope you don't think I'm being flaky. Now, maybe you genuinely want to give context. That's fine. But sometimes that dissertation is not communication. It's defense. Because you are trying to present enough evidence that the other person cannot possibly object. Which is unfortunate because sometimes people are going to object anyway. And then what? Do you add footnotes, exhibits, call witnesses? At some point, the problem is not that you have failed to explain the decision clearly enough. The problem is that you believe another person's agreement is required before your decision gets to count. That is a pattern worth noticing. Now, I don't want to swing this all the way to never ask anyone for advice. I already know everything. No way. Sometimes you absolutely do not know. Sometimes another person has information you need. Sometimes you are emotionally activated and perspective helps. Sometimes you're making a decision that affects multiple people and their needs genuinely belong in the conversation. Sometimes you're entering an area where somebody else has expertise. Sometimes you have blind spots. Self-trust is not deciding that your first thought is sacred and everyone else should just shut the fuck up. That is not discernment. Self-trust means your own perception gets a seat at the table too. A real seat, preferably at the head of the table, and not the folding chair in the hallway after everyone else has voted. Support can inform your decision, but it should not replace your decision, because the goal is not isolation. The goal is internal authority. You can hear other people, consider their perspectives, take in new information, change your mind, and still remain the person making the decision. So here's the distinction I want you to start noticing. Am I looking for input, or am I looking for permission? Input sounds like, what am I missing? What experiences do you have with this? What would you consider? Do you know something about the situation that I don't? Permission sounds more like, tell me I'm not a bad person if I do this. Tell me this is reasonable. Tell me I'm allowed to want this. Tell me I'm not making a mistake. And the tricky part is, you may use the exact same words for both. You might ask, what do you think? But internally, the question is, will you approve of what I already want? That is what I want you to catch. Not the shame, not, oh great, now I'm asking for reassurance wrong too. Just notice the job you're giving the conversation, because once you notice it, you get another choice. So here is the practice for this week. Before you ask anyone else what you should do, write down your answer first. That's it. You're not forbidden from asking for advice afterward. You're not making a legally binding declaration. You're not signing your soul away. You are just giving yourself a chance to hear your own voice before everybody else gets in the room. So write, what do I think? Then, what do I want? Then, What am I afraid will happen if I choose that? And finally, what input would actually help me make this decision? The last question is particularly important because now you can ask for something specific instead of, what should I do? Maybe you ask, do you know whether this contract has a cancellation fee? Or, you've made a similar move. What surprised you about the transition? Or, I know what I want to do, but I'm getting really anxious about the conversation. Can you help me think through how to say it? See the difference? You're not handing over the steering wheel, you're using support, and your own answer stays visible. And sometimes, once you write down what you think before everyone else, you may realize you do not actually need advice. You just need courage, or reassurance, or company when you do something uncomfortable. Because let's face it, sometimes we all need someone to hold our hand during difficult things. And those are very valid needs too. But they're easier to meet when you name them accurately. So self-trust does not always mean knowing. It does not mean never regretting a choice. It does not mean never changing your mind. And it does not mean becoming so confident that every decision feels peaceful. Sometimes the choice you know is right for you still feels awful. Sometimes saying no feels wrong because saying yes was the old rule. Sometimes choosing yourself feels selfish because self-abandonment used to earn approval. Sometimes you make a decision and immediately experience the anxiety. That anxiety is not automatic proof the decision was wrong. You may simply be doing something unfamiliar. And unfamiliar decisions often come without the warm emotional confirmation that we think self-trust is supposed to provide. Self-trust is not, I always feel certain. It's closer to, I can hear myself even when other people have opinions. I can gather information without disappearing inside it. I can make a choice without guaranteeing I will never regret it. I can change my mind later without using that as evidence that I should never trust myself again. And that is a much more useful version. So if you've spent years asking everybody else what they think, I don't think the answer is to suddenly stop listening to everybody. I think the work is making sure that you can hear yourself too. Your wants count, your perception counts, your discomfort counts, your values count, your instinct count. Not because they are infallible, because they're yours. And if the larger goal is building a life that actually fits you, you cannot outsource every decision about what fitting means. So this week, before you pull a group chat, pause, write down your own answer, then decide what kind of support you actually need. Input, information, reassurance, help thinking, or maybe you already know, and what you really need is to practice letting that be enough. So this week's Substack post is, before you pull the group chat, what do you think? And I'm going to be going deeper into what happens when reassurance becomes permission, why overexplaining is often a clue that we do not yet feel authorized to make our own decision, and how to hear other people without losing your own answer in the process. Come read the full piece over on my Substack, and before you text anybody about the next decision you are making, do the experiment and write your answer first.